people.
Okay. This just popped up on my YouTube recommended today. So we'll just go over this real quick. We're going to go over it real quick, chat. I'm going to watch it at 1.5x speed so we can go through this. But yeah, okay. We'll just go through it real quick. All right? Even with our limited ability.
Vim
yeah.
When they feel like their current text editor is inadequate and they want to use something that's just more powerful and flexible and ultimately allow them to get their work done faster. But if you just start looking into Vim in 2021, you're probably going to come across a program called NeoVim.
Also, does anyone, is that really why the people do it? They're like, my current situation is inadequate? I don't really know. It's not that relatable.
And unsurprisingly, some people get really caught up on the difference, and they start to wonder, well, what are all the differences between Vim and NeoVim? Which one's better?
People do
what are the
get
pros and cons
upset
of
about
these two different text editors, instead of just starting to use one of them. So in this video, I'm going to go over some of the differences to help you make a decision.
I don't know. I honestly have no idea what the situation is here.
So let's get some background first. Vim stands for VI Improved. So it's the even
that
more
part's
extended
true.
version of VI, the Extended Line Editor Visual Mode. And this is a text editor that's installed by default on pretty much any Unix-based operating system. VI is the one I'm talking about. Whether that be a Linux distro, Mac OS, or BSD, it probably has VI on it. So Vim...
Doesn't it have Vim installed on everything? It's just set compatible? I'm pretty sure they just install Vim on anything. Does any place actually just install VI anymore? I don't actually know for sure.
Some things that VI didn't have, like syntax highlighting, code folding for different languages, and multi-level undo redo. Vim is an extended VI, and NeoVim is...
Also, it's hilarious he doesn't mention Vim script. Like, VI isn't... Oh, really? Not Vim. That's interesting. Like, Vim script is one of the major improvements and achievements of Vim. Like, yes, it's not a language that we love, but, like, that was not in VI. Like, Bram made VimScript the programming language and all the features that allowed people to actually do plugins.
Like an extended Vim, but with a couple other differences. One of them is how the projects are actually being developed. So they are both free and open source.
This is the part where I was like, I just get so not happy about this.
Is really just driven by its original author, Bram Molinar. And we can see
this is so not true. Well, I'll just let him finish and then we'll talk about it.
We go to the official Vim GitHub. So if we take a look at these commits here, we can see that all
Sorry,
these commits
oh my
are being
goodness.
done by Bram.
Do I need to make this small so your eyes aren't blinded?
To go to last week's commits, and they're still all Bram, and we could keep doing this all day, but that would be boring. You get the idea. Pretty much everything is done by Bram, at least as far as commits are concerned. Now, this is all well and good.
I'll just leave it up because otherwise it's
confusing. He doesn't have to accept other people's commits if he doesn't want to. Vim is his project, and he wants full control over what gets added to it. Now, this doesn't mean that other people don't actually work on developing Vim, because of course it is free and open source.
This is like such a dumb... Sorry, I don't mean to say it's a dumb point. This person's just making their like video or whatever. But Bram is the person that merges them in. That's true. And Bram sometimes makes his own changes and does other stuff. But a bunch of time he just literally applies the patch from people. They're still doing it. They just maybe don't get the credit here. So like when people are like, Bram's the only person that does stuff on Vim, I'm like, you're super just disrespecting all the people that work really hard on Vim. And it just like bothers me. It makes it sound so like NeoVim thinks that they're the only place where like people work together, which I don't think at all. It's so like Bram talks to people. There's a mailing list. There's issues. There's pull requests. Bram is like talking and working with people. Now he doesn't have exactly the same like development model as us. That's true. Or like he doesn't have exactly the same like things, like, but. It's just like, it's not the same thing as saying like he just wants it the way that he is. Like, we don't just let people merge code into NeoVim. I mean, we let a few people merge code into NeoVim. They get to click the button, but not anyone who just like submits a patch to NeoVim gets to just be like, and it's in. I just think it's like such a bad like criticism of Vim when it's framed this way. There are like other problems, or like maybe not problems, but just like differences of opinion. I think about it, but it's like, man, it's not as if like Bram has never worked with anyone before. Like, Bram works with people. Now there's some stuff like, for example, Vim 9, like I disagree with the direction that Vim is going with Vim 9. Like, it's not a direction that I agree with. And that's okay. Like, Bram can do that. It is his project. But it's just like, it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that his name is the one on the commits. And if you look at the commit messages, it pretty much always says the person who made the message. So if you just click this little drop down thing, in fact, why don't we just do that right now? And you look at these messages, Like, most of them, unless Bram's the one that actually did them, they'll have some person or they'll link to some issue. He's doing a bunch of, there you go. So it's like, hey, here's the person who did it. Bram's not saying that he's the one who did it. Like, saying this person did it. So anyways, I just always hate that criticism. It just seems like a really bad criticism of the project.
Can see the source code and contribute to it if they want, but ultimately Bram has the authority over what's going to get added in and what doesn't.
This is like literally the same thing as NeoVim. We have a certain number of people who have the authority to decide what gets in or doesn't get in. That's like exactly the same.
But when everything is controlled by one person, things do tend to get a little messy. So it's not unusual for spaghetti code to start piling up. And this is one of the major criticisms.
This is not because Bram is the one in charge. It's because Vim's 40 years old. Like, it's not because one person is in charge that spaghetti code happens. That doesn't even make sense.
Is that its code base is really, really messy. Maybe
in fact, usually it feels the opposite. When one person gets to write all the code, they can remember everything and they can do refactors and they can change stuff as they want. It's like when more than one person has to write the code or do things, then it gets messier. But whatever.
Have any coding experience, so think of it like writing a book. If you get a few hundred pages into writing your novel and nobody has reviewed it, nobody has critiqued it, nobody has looked over your writing to make sure that you don't have run-on sentences or grammatical errors or that it isn't just plain boring, it's more likely that you're going to have those problems in your writing. And same thing with code, and when this happens, or at least when spaghetti code starts to happen,
right,
it makes it really difficult for people to fork it or extend it themselves if they wanted to build on it. So
this is not because this, like, the reason that there's this idea of like some of the code is spaghetti or whatever. I mean, it's true that for like some of the code is old and difficult to read and understand, and it's grown like organically over 40 years. Good luck having growing organically code over 40 years that's like pristine. But the other thing is like Bram is committed to maintaining support for some like platforms and projects that like NeoVim decided not to. And so it's like we removed some aspects of that, or like removed the ability to make small builds. Those are just like decisions that we sort of like disagree on that we could talk about some other time for like why we disagree on those maybe, or like some of the reasons that I prefer NeoVim's method. But it's not like the reason that those problems exist are not because there's one person maintaining and doing the commits. That's like such a non sequitur that it's hard to even like process for that.
At NeoVim's GitHub. So we can take a look at these commits here. And you can see that there's several different people that are contributing to this project. In fact, there's 9 different people adding commits just within the first week. In the code base,
I like he just picks her in weeks like there's 9 people. Like there's also people that like comment on these PRs and do other things too. Like the person's name who's here is not necessarily the one who did like all of the work. You know what I mean? I don't agree with this analysis. Sorry, we'll go faster over this.
Cleaner. And in a way, it's sort of like a bleeding edge Vim, because both of these applications are still in development, but NeoVim tends to get features added to it before Bram implements them in his version of Vim. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. There also tends to be more radical features that are getting added, because again, this is community developed. There's sort of like a consensus that people have to come to before things get added. So
this is exactly the opposite of it. His argument is making exactly the opposite point that you'd expect. Normally when you have a bunch of people, it's hard to come up with radical decisions. And when you have one person, it's easy because you just decide. So like his argument for why NeoVim has more radical features is exactly the opposite. You'd expect exactly the opposite to be happening in NeoVim versus Vim. So that's like the first part. I don't have very many comments about the like new features getting added to NeoVim. We just have a different sort of like priority list, I think, than Bram, and like what we think is important to implement. We'll probably talk about those as we go.
Different people are going to want different things instead of Vim, where it's all just driven by one guy. It's all kind of just one vision for that project. Now, being bleeding edge isn't all sunshine and roses. If you take a look at the issues, for example, so NeoVim is a much younger project.
Guys, be prepared for literally the dumbest. Sorry, I was just like, this is actually a dumb argument. This doesn't make any sense to me. This is such a dumb argument here.
Than Vim. It's got 1.1 thousand issues, and Vim just has 1,000 issues. So kind of a high-level view of looking at it, but 10% more issues that have been opened in a younger project. You know, you kind of get the idea. Bugs tend to happen.
NeoVim has 1.1 thousand issues. This other one has 1,000. Therefore, NeoVim has more bugs. What? What? We make issues to talk about things. Bram has a mailing list. He emails on the mailing list. Like, they literally just use completely different platforms to have discussions. Like, could you say we should just make up another metric, which is this: NeoVim has 40,000 stars and 1,000 issues, and Vim has
project.
What is it here?
Bugs tend to have. It's got 1.1 thousand issues, and
Vim has 22,000 and 1,000 issues. So NeoVim has a 50% rate of issues to stars. So we know now that NeoVim has has half as many bugs as Vim. Like, what? You're just what? We've spent, yeah, exactly. We've spent 5 minutes so far, and all he said basically is like Bram commits more, and then things that don't make sense. No offense, but like this is the reason that I get upset a little bit about this is because I love the Vim community. Not just NeoVim, but I love the Vim community, and I like Bram a lot. I don't think Bram knows who I am. That's fine. He has no reason to know who I am. But like, I like Bram, and I like what he's doing, like, with Vim generally, even if I disagree with some of the ideas, or like sometimes some of the interactions are difficult or like frustrating or whatever. Like, we spent 5 minutes, we haven't talked about any meaningful differences, and then this like 1.1k issues versus 1k issues, like, what? That doesn't make any sense at all.
Has 1,000 issues, so kind of a high-level view of looking at it, but 10% more issues that have been opened in a younger project. You know, you kind of get the idea. Bugs tend to happen a bit more within NeoVim. I'm sure that you guys, who, especially those Arch users who are using bleeding edge applications,
Arch users, by the way,
you know the deal. When everything is just being released bleeding edge, it hasn't been tested as much, so bugs will occur.
That is totally not the case at all. Like, this is literally not the case at all. Like, we have a stable release that we do, and then we have a master branch that people use because they like having the newest features. It's not like we're just like releasing stuff willy-nilly. And we have a huge test suite that's integrated that runs on a bunch of different platforms. It's like, there's nothing in this sentence or argument here that makes sense in terms of like what is happening here and why you'd have like more issues, or saying that like bleeding edge is whatever. Like, when you use master branch of a project, you're accepting that some things might change or some things might break. That's not like a feature or bad thing about a project or not. It's just like the agreement that you make. We have stable releases, and we release those, and they are cool. And we've found bugs, and we've submitted patches to Vim, and Vim makes patches, and we port those to NeoVim, and we share in fixing bugs together. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, there's nothing about this argument that makes sense in terms of like actual experience and sort of like the contracts that we make with users.
Now, this isn't to say that NeoVim itself is buggy, but you might notice some bugs, especially in newer features of it, especially if you're installing the absolute latest builds of NeoVim. So it might be handy to have both of them installed on your system, both Vim and NeoVim. They're neither.
Or just like an older stable version of NeoVim, if you were wondering. I'll post a link at that.
It's a very big application in and of itself, but you can have Vim as a backup in case it does happen that your build of NeoVim ends up being buggy, so you can use that to get critical work done, or of course you can just revert back to your latest.
I've literally used NeoVim nightly, and sometimes work in progress branch on NeoVim nightly for the past like several years. I've never been like unable to complete the work that I need to do for the day because of my NeoVim version.
This version of NeoVim before things went haywire. Another big difference is Lua support. So both of these programs.
So finally, we're getting to real difference between the two. It's 60% of the way through the video.
Support plugins written in Lua, but on the Vim side, it's really just treated like another plugin language, whereas NeoVim really incorporates Lua a lot more. In fact, you don't even have to use Vim script inside of your Vim.
So this is one thing that a bunch of people miss as well, is Lua is an optional build feature for Vim, which means like you can't write a Lua plugin and expect everyone to be able to run that in Vim, which is fine. Like, Vim has different builds and different builds. That's one of Vim's features that NeoVim like changed to not, right? So that's like a huge difference. The huge difference is that for NeoVim, like it says, the Lua 5.1, so always Lua 5.1 is built in and available. Vim can ship with 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, etc., which is quite complicated for like a plugin author to use and write like complicated plugins in if you don't even know if it's going to be available or if it's going to be a different thing or whatever, all this other stuff.
RC, you could just do everything in Lua. Now, another thing that is worth mentioning are the defaults in NeoVim versus Vim. So NeoVim, it has a lot of default settings that most Vim users are just...
This is true, but also on more later versions of Vim, they have a new defaults.vim that helps with some of these, at least, I think.
Just going to change anyway, at least as soon as they learn about making persistent settings in their Vim RC. So this is good because it's going to make a lot of people who are new to Vim more comfortable with saner defaults and keep them from having to make heavier modification in Vim RC once they get to that stage of learning Vim.
This is totally true, and this is one of the things, like, the first time people open Vim, like, if they have a bad experience, they're never going to open it again. I think NeoVim, and like Vim as well, I think is working on this as well, but we're trying to make it so that it's much easier for people to start using Vim or NeoVim, like right from the beginning.
And another big reason why NeoVim was originally forked for Vim, probably the biggest reason, is asynchronous I/O. So Vim, it is a single-threaded application, which might seem fine.
NeoVim runs on an event loop. Well, I guess we'll just listen to this whole argument here.
Considering how lightweight it is. But this becomes a problem when you start calling external commands from Vim, such as make, grep, or any other shell command that might take some time, because you can actually access your shell from within Vim. So because the editor is single-threaded, it has to wait for all of those external processes to finish before you can go back to editing text. The core program, it is still single-threaded, but since Vim 8, there has been support for plugins to asynchronously execute commands in a separate process and then pass the results back to Vim upon completion. Vim 8 also added an embedded terminal.
That's true.
So that's another feature that only NeoVim had for a while. In fact, we really have NeoVim to thank for a lot of Vim's newer features, because it was the competition pressure from NeoVim. You know, Vim doesn't want to become this sort of obscure thing that nobody really uses anymore. Vim doesn't want to become the next VI.
So this is, I think, just the completely wrong take about why Vim got some of the features that NeoVim implemented first. I'm very, very confident with the limited interactions I've had with Bram and from reading other things on the mailing list and just talking with other people. Bram is not like, oh, NeoVim implemented this, we have to do that. I don't think Bram thinks that at all. In fact, like, a lot of times I think Bram just doesn't care about NeoVim at all, which is cool because he's working on Vim and he's doing tons of stuff there. I think what happened was a bunch of people were like, oh, I can see how a built-in terminal was helpful for people when I was using NeoVim. I would like this in Vim. They send things to the mailing list. Bram reads more feedback that's saying, hey, we could use an embedded terminal. Like, we think it would be useful. Bram says, okay, can you give me some examples? They give Bram some examples. They convince him that it's a useful feature. Bram says, oh, I see, that's a useful feature. Let me implement that. I just think it's completely the wrong take based on interactions that I've had with the larger Vim community to be like, Bram's like, oh, I don't want to be left behind. I don't think that's it at all. I don't think there's like any aspect of that that's happening. And I really dislike, I'm not saying that this person is character attacking Bram, but like for me, it feels very much like there is a character attack about this thing. Like Bram is like copying NeoVim and doing it antagonistically. I don't think that's it at all. I think Bram and NeoVim have like a perfectly professional and nice relationship, and we have done several things together. And B. Friedel is actually even like chatting with Bram occasionally right now about adding Tree Sitter to Vim. It's possible that it could happen at some point, someday. I don't know. We don't know. We're just chatting about it. We're just friendly people working on projects together, trying to make editors better. Like, I don't think it's this like angry fight back and forth between each other.
Essentially. So all of that competition from NeoVim got Bram to add those features in.
See, like, show me the proof. Show me the proof that the competition from NeoVim got Bram to merge this. I don't think that is like the case at all. But I would be willing to be like, I would be willing to change my mind, but there's no proof of this. It's just saying like, this thing happened, then this thing happened, therefore it happened because of the other thing. No, that's not how like causation works.
And I always say that competition is a good thing. That's one of the many reasons why I enjoy Linux so much, because there's so much competition from different distros to all be either the easiest or the leadest or the most secure or the most minimal, that it basically forces everybody to step their game up. And it also gives the consumer, the end user, a lot more choice in their OS than you would get with Windows or Mac OS. Hell, I wish that there were even more highly popular forks of Vim, just to keep the Vim and the NeoVim developers on their toes and keep them adding great stuff. So there you go, the differences between Vim and NeoVim. Now, let's answer the burning question that I'm sure you guys all have.
So, What didn't we talk about? Remote plugins, built-in LSP, tree sitter. We didn't talk about like what it means to have Lua JIT embedded. We didn't talk about Lua init.lua. We didn't talk about like those are all things that are different between NVim and Vim. Like those are all things that are different. Like today we just made a plugin in Rust and we communicated over RPC with NeoVim. There's like the NVim exposes a remote API that's version compatible that you can find out stuff and you can declare and you can inspect. Like there are a bunch of reasons why I love NeoVim and like why I think it's cool. Check health is a cool one. Not to toot my own horn because I made check health, the first version of it. But like it's a cool feature about NeoVim trying to make it more accessible for people. But it's like, man, where we said, hey, Lua exists in NeoVim and it has different defaults. That's a 10-second video. So it's just like, but these exact points I hear repeated over and over and over in the community. And that's what like frustrates me about it. I'm not like trying to pick on this person at all. I don't know them. I don't harbor any like animosity or anger towards them, but it's just like, man, this is like, I don't think you see any of the big things like why it's happening, why these things are happening. Yeah.
Which one of these text editors should you use if you're trying to become elite text editor? I would say just go ahead and get your feet wet with Vim first. You probably already have it on your machine already, so you don't have to worry about installing it or it not being available in your repository if you're using some more obscure Linux distro, and you don't have to worry about building it from source from GitHub. There's a lot more documentation on Vim.
I also like, he's sort of like recommending getting started with Vim or NeoVim, and he says like use Vim. But in his pros and cons for NeoVim, he's like, NeoVim has much better defaults and like startup experience. You're like, yeah, which is fine. I'm not saying you can't start with Vim. I often recommend people just use whichever one you already have installed. Use the one that you're more comfortable with. Use the one that your friends use. Totally cool. I often even recommend just try like Vim Tutor and VI mode in your like editor that you use today. But it's like, did we forget the only 2 points that were made in this video?
Well, and it would be easier to find that good documentation if you're searching for the keyword Vim rather than NeoVim. But again, any documentation that you're going to find for NeoVim is probably going to apply to Vim as well, and vice
That's
versa.
pretty true. Yep.
Because as far as the main controls go, everything is the same. Even the Vim script syntax that you would use to configure your editor is the same. So going from Vim to NeoVim, it isn't this huge jump. It's not like going from a manual to an
he mentions it like so casually, but it's such a huge deal that NeoVim and Vim share the vast majority of VimL, both like syntax and implementation. It's not just they have the same syntax, they have a bunch of the same functions and a bunch of the same actions, and in fact a bunch of the same code because it's a fork.
automatic car, or well, the opposite would be a much bigger jump. Or go.
Oh, and I guess, sorry, just one more thing while I'm thinking about it. Like, that's the reason that I care about the community. Like, I want the community to be friendly, and like, I want them to like each other. Yes, I'm a NeoVim core developer. Obviously, I like NeoVim. I like developing for NeoVim. That's cool. But it's like, I love the Vim community as a whole. So it's cool to me that they work together more strongly than just like, oh, they kind of like do stuff.
Going from using Windows to Arch Linux, but NeoVim and Vim, they pretty much drive the same way. I would say that it will probably take a while before you really start running into things that you really need NeoVim for, unless you just right away need that good asynchronous functionality and that better Lua support.
Well, it says like the asynchronous functionality. No, that's in Vim right now. It's in Vim. Like Vim has async too, so that's the part I don't understand. Like NeoVim runs on an event loop, but it's still like a single thread main loop. It doesn't have more than one main loop, so that doesn't follow that that's the case. So that part just doesn't make sense. Also, I think Peak, you mentioned earlier, like, hey, there's like Lua and we're making it super easy to configure everything in Lua. Like, that might be a reason that you might want to start with NeoVim instead. If you had experience with Lua, or you're more comfortable learning it, or you feel like it's better language, you could use that to configure your stuff.
But yeah, if you need that, I would say NeoVim is better. Hope you found this video useful. Have an excellent day.